This is day 5 of the August 90 7-day retreat at Springwater. A lot of the questions that came up were about desire. If we group it a little bit topically, about desire and about what was said, that there's no progress, no making progress. Questioning that. And since a number of people have mentioned to me how helpful it is to hear other people's questions, I will read a selection of questions again. Reminding people these are not verbatim statements. Sometimes they are a condensation of several questions. So if a question that one asked does not appear here in the talk the way it was asked, please don't feel that you were not listened to or misunderstood. You once said earlier in the retreat, when there's just the joy and peace of just sitting, who is the enjoyer? Does this mean that enjoyment is already a separation? And does it mean that it is wrong to enjoy something? I'll read this question again that we started with yesterday and we didn't come back to it. And it was, I've worked a lot with my personality and would like to go on to a level beyond personality. If I told my friends and colleagues what you're saying here, they would either laugh or look at me unbelievingly. What you say is totally opposite to what society says. How does one live with that? When I feel how utterly lonely I am, it becomes almost unbearable. And I want to give the whole thing up. This whole thing of looking. When I see all my defensiveness and look beyond it or glimpse beyond it, beyond all the ideals I have built up about myself, I don't like what I see in myself. Actually, I hate what I see in myself. It's so painful to look, so painful to see what I've done, how I've affected the people around me. When I feel the pain of that, I want to get away from the whole thing. When I hear you say that one needs curiosity or passion to listen and to discover, I immediately desire that curiosity and that passion. When I see a beautiful woman with grace, beauty, softness, peaceful expression in her face, I want to be part of all that, which I myself lack. I want what I perceive in her for myself. Yesterday after the talk, I saw very clearly my addictive thoughts about being in a different and better place, and the pleasure derived from these thoughts. I see that this is desire, but without desire, you and I wouldn't be here. We are the results of desire. And without desire, we would not be here in Springwater. There's also something in that question, like, is there such a thing as right desire and wrong desire? The right kind of desire and the wrong kind of desire. How do you know the difference between repressing something and something dropping away out of seeing it? There was also a question about questioning. I didn't write it down. A person said something like this: I have a difficulty with questioning because it seems that one question just leads to another question and another question and another. Wanting the answers and never leaving that realm of thinking, of intellect. And we'll start briefly with this, because it's important that no one feel under pressure to bring a question to a meeting. I'm not sitting there waiting for questions so I can hold a bunch of papers in my hand the next day. I always have enough leftovers. So please, not to feel under pressure, not to drum up a question for the sake of Toni or the meeting. Questions are useful when they come out of one's own being, out of one's own problems or concerns or conflicts or pain. And then to share them, go into it together, can be very helpful and clarifying, or getting one deeper into it. Deeper sometimes meaning to the point of feeling the pain of seeing what's going on in oneself. And we're not saying one ought to feel pain about oneself. We're not saying one ought to in any way. Maybe sometimes it's hurt like that. And to what we started yesterday, is there something beyond personality? Putting it very concisely now. We haven't come to a conclusion about that, have we? And we don't need to. But leave that question open. To wonder in the light and in the power of this question. It was interesting. Yesterday someone said, it's so good to hear at least a few questions that other people have. Because here I see 40, 50 people, but I don't know them. You get to know them somehow, but I don't. Sort of sad, all of these people, and I don't know them. But you know, there's another side to this. 48 or 50 people together without knowing much of each other's personality. And yet, we're sitting together, we're breathing the same air, we're eating the same food, we're sleeping in the same building. Most of us, some people sleep in tents. We're doing work together. We're walking together. I'm not singing the song of praise of togetherness, but it's a very rare opportunity to be with each other without personalities. We can project, of course, and that happens, and then one can watch the whole process of projection, projecting onto other people, things. Maybe from hints one gets by observing them. But without projection, we're all human beings here doing work together, sitting quietly together. And as someone put it, one does not have to talk to each other in order to be in communication with each other or in communion. Remember the very first sesshin I went to? Many years ago, but it sticks in the mind. Didn't know anybody. Very apprehensive about going to something I had read so much about. There were a few people in the kitchen, one person in front of the sink washing beans, and my job was to deposit some trash or garbage, and that was in a cabinet underneath the sink in front of which a person was washing the beans. And as I approached the sink from behind, she stepped out of the way. I opened the closet, put the garbage in, closed it, and she stepped back in front of the sink. That was a marvel. Maybe we will start with desire, because we went into it quite a bit yesterday. Maybe it's still fresh or can freshen up in the mind. We talked about the possibility of actually observing the arising and progression of desire. Starting with a feeling of discontent or blindness, lack of stimulation, boredom, or a deep feeling of lack. And then either seeing someone or something actually, or an image coming up in the mind. Seeing the person directly, let's take that, and projecting images onto that person. Not just onto the person, but seeing oneself with that person. And the whole process of physical desire, wanting to touch, wanting to own, to possess, to be with, setting into motion. Can be a person, can be an object, or a state, a better state to be in, a better place where one will be happy, at peace, without problems, without pain, taken care of. The image of that and the involvement, the triggering of the involvement of the whole physical organism to get there, to get that, to be with this person, to own him or her, possess each other, to make up for this feeling of lack or pain or boredom. We're not condemning desire, we're looking at it so that there comes to be some present-mindedness, some alertness, awareness of what moves us. And to what degree this is possible is, who knows? We mentioned yesterday that before an impulse comes into awareness, into consciousness, there is already electrical activity in the brain that the person is not conscious of. Been experiments on that. I heard about it. I'm interested to read up on it further. But a lot can come into awareness if there is the interest to find out, and not just brushing it off by saying desire is natural, it's human nature, and so forth. Or condemning desire, saying in order to do spiritual work, I must cut off the root of all desire. One vows that at spiritual centers. The idea being that the energy that goes into desire will now go into getting to enlightenment or to union with God. All the while, only fragmented awareness of the energy that goes into imagining. So, can one look and listen and find out? There's tremendous joy in this discovery if one really sees this whole process directly. Yeah, it is so, or it's a little bit different, but it's so in principle and basics, not in principle. It's so. But not to take anybody's word for it, because it's possible for each one of us to see this for ourselves. Don't have to agree. We don't have to agree on this with each other. Listening to this being said does not mean to agree with what I say. It means to listen, to take it in, to wonder about it, and look for oneself. We'll have to come back to the question whether desire has to arise when one sees a beautiful woman or man or object. We'll come to that, but I want to stick for the moment with this question whether there's such a thing as a right kind of desire and a wrong kind of desire. The right and wrong, we'll put them in quotation marks. There's no arguing the fact that when we were conceived, very likely out of desire of our parents. We don't quite know how it happened. We weren't there. Some spiritual tradition says whatever this entity is in the bardo sees the parents in union and chooses the womb. One can believe that. But it's a belief, as far as I'm concerned. You may have seen it for yourself as a fact, I don't know. But in general it is so. Desire, sexual desire, the conception, and here's a baby and an adult. We wouldn't be there without it. Who knows? We don't know the possibilities for human beings. People ask that question and really look whether there can be sexual intercourse without desire, without imagery. Quite a number of people are very interested in this and are questioning, and we're talking about it, looking at it, wondering about it. one has to watch. Maybe the last thing one wants to do. So, how about coming to a place like Springwater where one looks at desire? And in looking, one may find one has come here out of desire to find something, to become something. We asked usually the very first evening, why did we come here for? What are we here for? To open this whole thing up, to look at our superficial motives, they pop up right away, and maybe deeper motives reveal themselves. And is it really this kind of desire we've described, that one imagines something to get or remembers something one has gotten and wants to get that again? Maybe this time even better, longer. That may be in there. Or can there also be such a thing as just needing to come here? There's a need. One doesn't know what one will come upon in a retreat, but one will meet up with what comes. Because there's no choice, one is not going to go on living the way one lives, so darkly or painfully. There may be desire to get rid of pain or just a need to look into it. There's a difference there. And I'm not elevating one over the other. There may be a mixture of both. But one may find when the desire for a goal, for an ideal state is seen and drops out, drops away, there's still the need to be with what's there. Or just being with what's there. Is that possible, to be with what's there without desire? Is it possible to be without desire? We're throwing it out into the ring. I'm part of this ring. And with this we come back to the earlier question, is it possible to see a beautiful woman or beautiful man, child, flower, whatever? See it, behold it. This word is quite beautiful, to behold it. Be in touch with it, and not the fantasy starting up, I want that, I want her, I want him. I need him to fulfill me, or to give me what I lack so we can complement each other, and all on and on it goes in the fantasy and in the words, and the body is agitated and making ready to go to get it, with a lot of expectation, and with that, of course, the potential for tremendous disappointment, pain, disillusion. You could say, well, why do you always talk so negatively? What if you get together and you're the happiest pair in this world? At least, even if you're not the happiest pair in this world, you're willing to work on what's going on. That's very rare, very rare. Most of the time, when, as the writer in the last newsletter put it, the dream person turns out to be a real person, one looks elsewhere for fulfillment, complementing oneself with a new dream person. Very rarely are two human beings inclined to really work at their difficulties, which arise inevitably because two bundles of conditionings and conditioned problems, conditioned pains and hurts come together. And will one even see the projections and the expectations? Or just blame the person for not being the way one thought he, she was? But we weren't going to go into relationship in this talk, although it's always there, isn't it? Maybe it's our deepest problem, how to relate with each other without desire. Is that possible? Not to try to make the other one over in one's own image. Not to want the other to fulfill one. Does that sound possible or workable? We're wondering, we're leaving it open, whether one can live with each other without, let's say, constant desire, forgetting, having, receiving, or constant desire for giving. There can also be a strong desire to be of importance in what I do for you, but you better acknowledge it somehow, because this is my raison d'être, my reason for being, to give, to be of help. We can smother each other in that way. So, in watching desire, the whole movement of desire, in that watching, in that looking, can that end? So that for whatever period of time, there is no desire. The mind and body is free of desire. It's just looking and listening. Then the looking and listening is very clear, unobstructed, undistorted, because we don't want anything of anybody or of anything. And therefore it can reveal itself, or himself or herself, for what we are this moment. Desire isn't tugging, pushing and pulling, distorting, projecting. One can experiment with this, find out about it, in looking at something, how quickly I would like to have that, and seeing oneself have that. And if one sees that, can one look again without that? Not that's wrong, it's bad, I must improve. It's all desire. I must become better, I must become desireless. It's a very insidious desire. Something dropping out of the clarity of it's being seen, understood, all the way through. And with this we come to this very brief question. What's the difference between repressing something and something dropping? In repression, there is thought and vow or principle or fear. Fear of facing something and an automatic automatic mechanisms in the brain and body to shut down when something becomes an overload of anxiety. There's a shutdown mechanism. It has nothing to do with will. I want to repress this thing. It happens. And whatever reminds one of the thing is also shut down. Ignored. So one can look at it and not, the fear is gone out of it because something is shut down. An association is, I don't know what happens neurologically, but something does happen. Or else one has taken a vow, since we've talked about desires, to cut desire, to be celibate. And every time something comes up that incites desire, there comes the repression. This is bad. This is against my vow. I'm transgressing. Guilt and so forth. I must not, thou shalt not. These are all repressive injunctions, either coming from the outside or having been internalized and aiding in the process of repression or suppression. But to see desire coming up for this person, we've described it, the imagery, imagination, seeing oneself with this person. And then just about the body to start up, to see it and be done with it. Because one sees the whole process setting into motion and it leads nowhere. I'm talking right now of examining this here, because if one is, I don't want to say don't ever desire another person. That's how we get together. Most of the time. All the time, maybe. But maybe there is a time for not desiring another person. It is out of place. It will only create problems, complications. Then can the thing be seen, and seeing all the things arise, seeing the complications, without any suppression, just the intelligence can come into action. The intelligence of seeing. Seeing that with the imaginative play, we're not here. We're not here with this feeling of lack, of boredom, pain. We're not facing what's there. And will not face what's there by playing with the imagination and then going for the imagined person or object. Having temporary pleasure does not resolve our deep feeling of lack, conviction of lack, our deep feelings of loneliness. That cannot be resolved through desire. It's created by desire in the first place. So, will one be with the feeling of lack and wonder about it? Will one look at what reveals itself about oneself and put aside the ideal images which create the conflict, the pain? If one had no ideals about oneself, there would be not all of this pain in facing what one actually sees about oneself. There could be honesty, directness, and this is how I am, this is what happened with this person, with my children, with my parents, with my lover. I don't have to pretend to be anything or anybody, Because I'm not. This is just imagery. We are moving life processes tremendously influenced by the past and by the present forces which trigger the past. Putting blame puts the blinders on, the blinders to looking and discovering and opening up to what's there, including the pain that may have come from realizing one is not how one thought or hoped one was. And then feeling that, not making another story over this pain and making oneself into a victim of the pain. See, the brain is a constant story weaver which affects us. How we put things about other people and ourselves to ourselves affects us tremendously. The names we call ourselves and others affect us and affect others and affect the people to whom we talk about others, creating images about each other through names and words we use, particularly when they're loaded names and words. So is it possible to look at desire without desire? To do something about it, get rid of it, just a looking, which has no push or pull, no motive other than that this thing is there and operating. So even though one reflects that everything one did until now, including coming here, was a product of desire, does not mean that it can't be looked at and maybe end in the looking. Not for all eternity, but in the looking now. In the insight, in the listening, call it what you will. I don't know whether to start with the other question about progress, time, change over time, and the immediacy of insight, or whether to leave that for tomorrow. I think we'll leave it for tomorrow, because this thing of desire is vast, isn't it? This whole movement of me is desire and fear. The two of them almost inextricably linked, fear and desire. And desire and fear. Fear of not keeping what one has desired and maybe found. Or fear of not having what one desires. Or fear of not getting it. Or fear of being. Fear of facing and therefore desire to be someplace else or someone else. Something different. Is that so that the whole movement of me is a movement of desire? Toward or away from? of deep-seated fear of not being. Can we look at that? Bring that to light. The light of a fresh day. Which has never been here before. It's there. Looking without desire at desire and looking without fear at fear, is that possible? Someone says, yes, it's possible. Does it help? Does it wipe away discouragement so one can look? Or does one have to look at discouragement too and let it drop in the looking? See, looking, listening has no special quality. Someone said it's like water. Has no quality of temperature, or color, or smell, or taste, or form. It's just clear. Can one look at desire and fear clearly? We will end here for today.